Through the mists comes forth RPGaDay! In the year 2021, RPGaDay comes back for its 8th year. A time in August when every day we tackle another question or topic by answering in a way that uplifts the gaming community and answers questions people might have about this crazy hobby of ours that serves to build the community and bring it up, that many of us make blogs about, video blogs, art, or great works. In celebration of the community of gamers, I welcome you to RPGaDay 2021. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Rob, sometimes the Dungeon Tutor, and sometimes Omnisci. Today is the 14th day of RPGaDay. We've done 14 of these videos, and we have more yet to do. Today's topic is safety, which is why I'm wearing the safety hat with the light. Because today we're talking about safety, and safety is one of those things that's kind of an oxymoron in a lot of role-playing games. A lot of them. Because, after all, adventurers often do things that thrust them in the absolute opposite of safety, which is danger. And a lot of the premise behind most role-playing games, if not all, at least having some elements, of danger and conflict. Because danger is exciting. Danger is the crucible upon which your characters are tried and either found wanting if they fail and get injured or even killed, or they succeed, they triumph, they come out on top. And safety is something that a lot of characters really do ascribe to. They want to be safe, or they want to make their lives as safe as possible. Now, excluding thrill seekers who intentionally endanger themselves, let's just look at, say, fantasy gaming for an example. Actually, you know what? I'm tired of fantasy. Let's go and look at science fiction. Okay? Let's go to science fiction. Now, science fiction, while it may seem that, there aren't as many dragons and things to worry about, there seems to be no shortage of things to really have to worry about in science fiction either, because it's usually action-packed. There's usually things going on. Inherently, into science fiction, if you're dealing with space, space is inherently dangerous. You have, of course, the possibility of dying in exposure of vacuum. That's always bad. The danger that if you are in space, you are presumably in some sort of ship or space station, which itself could get blown up or destroyed. So that's certainly dangerous. And there's always a possibility of encountering something out there that you either can't explain or have never encountered, or is an all too familiar threat. For instance, in Star Trek, running across Klingons is rarely going to be something that isn't at least somewhat dangerous. They're very good at being dangerous. They're Klingons. So, safety then, as far as your genre is considered, is oftentimes going to be a motivating factor for a lot of what you encounter in a role-playing game. For instance, in science fiction, you can do a number of things to try to ensure your safety. You can make your ship better. For instance, if you're playing something like Star Wars, some of those early Star Wars games really did have a decent focus on getting a ship and making it better and better so that it could take on greater and greater challenges that you'd be faced with, be they pirates, be they the Empire if you were a rebel, be they just being able to go from point A to point B faster to get away from things. These were elements that could help greatly increase your personal safety and the likelihood that you could escape scrapes without death or severe loss. On a more personal level, it's often easy to kind of look at, okay, we shoot guns that can vaporize or kill people. Well, lockstep with the urge to find new and more inventive ways to kill your opponents is also some desire to want to survive violence and to be able to protect yourself in the occasional violence. So therefore, why do stormtroopers wear armor in Star Wars, for instance? It's because theoretically, that armor should help to keep them alive in conflicts. It doesn't seem to work so good when the heroes are shooting them, but against things like rocks and arrows from Ewoks, that didn't seem to work very well either. Let's face it, being an extra in Star Wars is kind of sucks. You're a pretty good chance of dying no matter what, even if you are wearing what is considered to be state-of-the-art armor for your time period. It just can't make you really safe. But what can make you safe? Well, number one, being important to the plot seems to work pretty good for a lot of science fiction. I mean, you never see Han Solo wearing armor, but he never gets really shot or killed. Leia doesn't really wear much more. I think she wears a vest and a helmet in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, but she gets shot even in a place where she's not wearing armor. And grazed only, yes, but, she still gets shot. That's going to leave a scar. Maybe not with Bacta, but it doesn't matter. So your own personal safety is always going to be at war with your need to go out and do something, which is almost always going to put you at some element of risk. Maybe social risk. Perhaps you can injure your social standing or some such. But in adventure, oftentimes it's that more visceral physical threat, or even a threat to your sanity and well-being in the case of something like a Call of Cthulhu that can erode your sanity and your mind. And ultimately, we do try to find ways of shoring that up. Now, sometimes it's gear. As I said, maybe you can find some kind of armor that is resistant to blasters in Star Wars. One would think that, like, Boba Fett's bounty hunter armor is probably pretty good at protection against such things. Not invulnerable, clearly. The weapons are better than the armor is. In modern day, yeah, you can have armor, but there's nothing that is absolutely invulnerable to the right kind of weapon. You can have ceramic plated armor with layers of reinforced Kevlar. There is a round that can go through that. You're never going to be completely safe because our ways of inventing ways to kill people always seems to be on top of our ways of protecting ourselves. And that pretty much seems to fall in line with every genre there is. Sometimes you can get kind of close. For instance, medieval knights who would wear the full suit armor, against somebody else coming up to them with a sword or a knife would seem, where am I going to put this? Everything seems to be covered. Well, you get creative. You go after joints. You go after try to wrestle the person down and take care of that paradigm that they are a walking armored turtle that can't be beaten. Take them off their feet, and now all of a sudden you can step on their arms so they can't fight back or roll out, and then you can get creative in how you kill them by stabbing into the slits of their helmets, or there are gaps. There's always going to be some gaps. So you can eventually get to a point where armor seems to win in the battle between ways of killing and ways of protecting. But then guns come around, and crossbows that can punch through plated armor. And all of a sudden, armor doesn't seem to make any sense anymore because it's only hot and uncomfortable, and now everybody is using guns, or everybody at least has access to guns, or everybody has access to crossbows. We suddenly don't feel as protected anymore. So armor starts to kind of go away in importance as the ways to defeat it have come out. Star Wars would seem to bear this up. Most people don't run around in armor. Why? Not because the threat that they are engaged in violent activities that they may be shot at, but it's just that it's not worth trying to wear anything that might be able to mitigate that because something would be very, very bulky or impractical. So you get by with just trying not to be shot or trying not to be killed in other ways. And, again, role-playing games tend to bear that out. If you think about, say, Star Trek, the idea, it's space fantasy. I have a need and there is a technological fix for it. Again, the ways of killing somebody have outstripped the defenses even in Star Trek. There's no personal force fields, unless you create them for the game, that stop somebody from firing a phaser beam set at disintegrate. If you're hit, you're just dead. Poof, gone. Star Trek doesn't pull any punches that way. The weapons are decidedly deadly, and even ones that aren't phaser poof, you're dead. They've gone out of their way to show that disruptors, for example, for Klingon technology, are pretty dang deadly, and so are the variety of other weapons that we see used in Star Trek. The means of protection are not up to taking on the number of ways that you can imperil yourself. So, but what does this mean as far as safety? I mean, yes, you can have some gear, but does it ever make you safe? If I have this helmet on, am I safe from a heavy weight being dropped on my head? No. It gives me a chance, but against anything really heavy, this splits and my head still looks like a splattered watermelon at a Gallagher concert. No, it just kind of helps. It increases the odds, the probabilities that you survive something dangerous. And that's kind of appropriate for adventure, isn't it? Because if you completely made it completely safe, if that was even a possible thing, you take away the thrill, you take away the excitement, you take away the reason why we roll dice and want to know and hang on the result of a roll. Because even though it's not always life and death, you never can feel completely safe when you expose yourselves to danger in the course of an adventure. And for some people, we discussed in the prior video of Flood, you may never really ever feel safe. You may be in a situation where it's always a war zone around you. Again, that circumstance of a person in Shadowrun who ran foul of a megacorp and is now on the run, going from coffin hotel to coffin hotel, always on the move so that the corporate hitmen can't take them down. You're never safe. And you can do all you can. You can try to get a coffin and you lock the thing as best as you can and make sure that you always randomize where you're being. Covers you so far. You can try to control the variables. You can try to make yourself as safe as possible. But ultimately, when the danger comes up, it'll be your character just doing what you can to make yourself safe. And in the course of something like grand fantasy adventuring, how did you make yourself safe? Well, of course you bought the best gear you could. You would get armor. If you were expecting to get into a fight, you would get armor. You would get weapons to take down your foes the faster. You might buy protection so that you have light to protect yourself against the perils of not being able to see where you're going. And maybe something like some protective garments against certain threats that you know about, like cave-ins. You might buy a 10-foot pole so that you can check for unstable floors or prod things without having to actually touch them. We had skills and different ways of going about to try to make ourselves as safe as possible. Some of those skills were handed down from adventurers who came before us and the players who lived through and lost characters and learned ways around some of those dangers. Yes. But safety is a dream that most characters in role-playing games can only imagine. And for most of them, the reality is that they spend their times just making things as safe as possible, even if that's not very safe at all. So when you're playing your characters, or when you're controlling characters as a game master, you gotta remember, safety, for whatever that means to a character, has gotta be one of the big motivating factors in what a character thinks about. Unless there's something really aberrant in that character, and it's not. Maybe they're driven by revenge. Maybe they're driven by something. But for most people, safety is kind of an important thing to think about, to consider, because the person who doesn't ever think about safety is either a fool or, again, aberrant in some way that they're completely fixated in a way that makes them decidedly unsafe. Which, to anybody else meeting somebody like that, generally is going to hurt your reaction to a person like that because they're not normal. They're not doing what you expect people to do, which is to be mindful of their own safety. And if they're a decent person, the safety of the people around them. So, safety can be a very important thing when thinking about role-playing games. And hopefully, this video has had you think a little bit about some of the motivations of characters, perhaps, or different ways that you can challenge the safety of characters, and both your own, possibly, or future characters that are playing in a game you might be running. Either way, one of the greatest things that you can do to make yourself completely safe, I assure you, is by subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification button. That really helps the safety. It ramps it up like 500% or something like that. But the best way, absolutely, to almost practically immortalize yourself is to leave a comment below talking about how you think that elements of safety relate to your game or something that you've conflicted with or that you've grappled with, and we can have a little discussion about that, which will definitely increase your survivability rate tremendously, I assure you. It's been scientifically proven by scientists in scientific settings, so yeah, absolutely. I would certainly love it too, and that would be great, but it's not nearly as important as your survival, which would be good. So yes, thank you. And if you like this, I made a lot of other videos. Feel free to look back at the RPGaDay videos, or maybe the other ones that I make in Lair of Omnisci, or maybe you can cross over to my Dungeon Tutor if you have questions about role-playing games or something. I make videos for people explaining how to do things, and hopefully you might like that too. But until next time, and hopefully there will be a next time, because I've got plenty more videos to make, thanks for joining me. I'm Rob, sometimes Omnisci, sometimes the Dungeon Tutor, and I thank you for joining me here in my little safe nook where I feel much safer. Thank you, and farewell.